Okay. Here we go.
Number 10. You might be the adult child of a 50-year diabetic if you have never even considered corn to be a vegetable, because Mom always said it was a carbohydrate. You might be the adult child of a 50-year diabetic if, when you hear random beeping while out with your mother, rather than check your phone or look around, you just look at her and say, "Mom, check your pump. I think it's time to test your sugar."
Absolutely.
You might be the adult child of a 50-year diabetic if you didn't even try any spaghetti sauce other than ragu until you were in college because it had the lowest carbohydrate count of any other American in the 80s and 90s. You might be the adult child of a 50-year diabetic if you've only ever managed to make it through the movie Steel Magnolias once without having to stop it before the part where Shelby dies. You might be the adult child of a 50-year diabetic if you make a doctor's appointment for your 2-year-old when he wets the bed 3 times in a week, convinced that the cause is a failing pancreas rather than, the fact that he's 2. You might be the adult child of a 50-year diabetic if there were only ever 2 requirements for hotels and rental homes when your family traveled on vacation. There couldn't be ceramic tile because insulin bottles crack on ceramic tile.
It's the only floor they break on.
And there had to be a decent exercise facility so Mom could exercise.
Only 2 criteria.
Only 2.
No ceramic tile.
Hey,
Must be an exercise room.
Mama!
You might be the adult child of a 50-year diabetic if your parents had a super secret telephone code before the days of smartphones, so that Dad could check to make sure Mom had made it through the night each morning when he would travel for work without actually calling and making the house phone. You might be.
Never ran the bill up.
She had to wake up at a certain time, take the phone off the hook, and then he would call, and if he didn't get a busy signal, he knew that it was a sign that he had to call the paramedics.
That's right.
So that was the super secret telephone.
Before cell phones.
Yeah. Now it just sent a text. You might be the adult child of a 50-year diabetic if your family never even considered waiting at a restaurant for more than 20 minutes for dinner as a child, because that was the length of time that would pass between Mom's insulin injection and the time she needed to eat to avoid low blood sugar. And on the rare occasion in which the wait lasted for more than 20 minutes because of slow service, your father earned the nickname the notorious flower kicker of Malta. Property of the restaurant.
I have my standards.
And he didn't ever explain it. This
Horace
happened.
Taylor's.
We went to ground round, and we had put our name in. We always tell the story.
We will. Let's get through our top 10 list.
Number 2. You might be the adult child of a 50-year diabetic if, as a 1-year-old, your child would run to the freezer at Grandma and Granddad's house every time Mom's insulin pump would beep because he knew that meant it was time for ice cream. And finally, the number 1 sign that you might be the adult child of a 50-year diabetic is if your 4-year-old once actually used the line, "Mommy, I need some cookies. My sugar's low." We are so proud of you, Mom.
Mommy, I never did that.
Yes, you did. You were dealt a very challenging hand in life.
Mommy,
You
I
handled
never
it
did
with
that.
such
Mommy, I actually didn't know. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who has also prepared some remarks.
Well, good afternoon. I echo the sentiments of my sister. If you're here today, it's because you are the people that my mother and our family hold most dear. I can remember one night when I was much younger, when I was a kid, waking up to an unnaturally loud thud from my parents' room, which I would later learn was my father stubbing his foot along one of the pieces of furniture.
Did you learn any new words that night?
I'm getting there. I opened my eyes and I heard my father saying, "Sarah, Sarah, can you hear me?" And it wasn't the words that frightened me, it was the fear in my father's voice. My parents have joked that I just sort of stayed in my room that night, processed what was going on. I just didn't have a real full understanding of it. That is incorrect. When my mother was finally stabilized, she walked out of the bedroom looking like she had stuck her finger in a socket. So,
She tried to style her hair with Eucerin.
can you imagine that visual? And she just sort of looks over at me, and she's got this, she's white as a ghost. And she goes, "We're good. We're good. And to this day, I am remembered for the quote that I gave as she walked down the stairs and out to the ambulance, which is, "Hire the handicap, they're fun to watch."
Everyone in our family laughed at the time. The paramedics were horrified. We were like, that's our sense of humor. We're good. We're good.
That's just how we roll. We learn a lot from our parents. For instance, the new words. We don't gather here today to mourn a setback. We gather to celebrate someone who, in spite of that setback, has lived an exceptional life. Mom, you are living and will continue to live, and quite honestly, you'll probably outlive all of us. An exceptional life. Quite honestly, you are the most exceptional person I know.
As unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. Chapter 1.
The best of time was the worst of time.
1898, a fellow by the name of Joslin, doctor, started preaching a concept about the management of diabetes that was extremely foreign at that time. And it was a simple principle. You give a diabetic information, knowledge, maybe some tools, and you put the onus of the control of their disease on them. Of course, in that day and age, doctors were held in high regard, and a lot of people didn't like that particular approach. But Dr. Joslin kept it up, and later the Joslin Center for Diabetic Research was born in Boston, again with that same philosophy of you give a diabetic control and information and tools, and they can manage their own life. And I think today we see the result of a diabetic that has embraced that particular concept. We were sitting at Wendy's the other day, or Panera Bread, we were sitting at Panera Bread, and we had this little guy with us. And we were having supper by the fireplace, because we had this little girl with us. And we're sitting there, and another grandmother and 6-year-old child come by, and they, "Could you mind if we sit by the fireplace?" "No, not at all." Right? And we're chit-chatting, and pretty soon the grandmothers are chit-chatting, the little boys are chit-chatting, and they're having fun. And Sarah does what Sarah does. Here, a little background, here, a little beep. Time to check your sugar. And so she sits down at the place, and she pulls out her glucometer, and she's doing this, right? And her son, her grandson, starts to say something. The grandmother pats him on the head and says, "Just wait a minute, they're praying." Well, the Joslin Center in Boston has been around, again, since 1898. Just 2 points that I want to make real quickly. Today, most cancers, somewhere over 85% of most cancers, if caught early, can be cured. Cured, if caught early. We even today, under some circumstances, can cure AIDS. But in a very real sense, our treatment of diabetes has not changed since 1922, when the first insulins were extracted from pigs and shot almost in their pig form into human beings. Now, our insulins have gotten purer, our knowledge of carbohydrates have gotten better, okay? The relationship between metabolism and diet and exercise has gotten smarter. And our insulin deliveries have gone from injecting multiple times a day to just an injection all the time. But fundamentally, our management of diabetes has not changed since 1922. And so for us to look at Sarah and say, wow, that's really an accomplishment, it is incredible. Let me give you an idea of how incredible it is. We learned last year, I did anyway, the Joslin Center has an award program for diabetics that have successfully managed their disease for 50 years. There are right now about 3 million diabetics, type 1 diabetics in the United States. Since 1952, when this award has been given, only 3,000 people have gotten it. If you're doing the math, that's 0.09% of diabetics. Joslin Diabetes Center established this award in 1970 to recognize the remarkable achievement of those individuals who have lived with insulin-dependent diabetes for 50 years or more. We now extend this tribute to you for your conscientious and courageous attention to the many difficult details involved in successfully living with diabetes over these many years. On behalf of the trustees, overseers, and staff of the Joslin Diabetes Center, we take great pleasure in awarding to you the enclosed Certificate of Achievement and the Joslin 50-Year Medal.
Oh, wow. They must have asked for proof.
Oh my goodness.
Which, I get it. You know, you could have anybody claiming it. You got to have proof.
Yes, because the rewards of being a 50-year diabetic are so great.
Yes.
That people are just clamoring for this award. After literally a month and a half of communication back and forth, I eventually got a faxed memo that had one sentence that said, you know, our records can verify that she's been diabetic since 1970. So the next thing I did is I reached out to some folks who had grown up with you, Patty, your brother Rick, each of which wrote lovely letters on behalf of
To Joslin.
to the Joslin Diabetes Center. I included a picture that's up there that I want all of you to sign. All right, it's very important. The fact that we were able to actually have a photograph from Children's Hospital of Sarah at the time that she was diagnosed went a long, long way. And I just have to tell you, Sarah, that everything I've read, the next 50 years is a little tougher.
Maybe for you.
But yeah. I just want to do one last thing, sir. I want to also, whatever you've got left in your glass, you can just raise it up for just 1 second. And then here's to Sarah, here's to relentlessness. I'll just leave it at that.
All
Sarah,
right.
relentlessness.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. This means a great deal to me and my family. I couldn't have done it without the support of all of you. You've been there for me at too many times that I can't even count, for which I'm truly, truly blessed. To my husband and children, wow. Wow. Eric, I'm sorry for your gray hair. I know I've caused a lot. But
Yes, I'm looking at my dad. Clearly, genetics had nothing to do with it.
one thing that I would like to say, two people that I would like to give credit to that are not here today because they've passed on, are my parents. When they heard in 1964 that I was diabetic, they didn't know what it meant. You know, their little girl had been on the critical list at Children's Hospital for a day and a half or I don't know how long. My poor father, he was like, oh. So one morning he sat me down, and I was little, I was about Nate's age. And he said, honey, he said, let me explain something. We hate giving you these shots, but this is what's keeping you alive and healthy. When you hear that as a not quite 5-year-old, it hits home. So I give credit to my parents, because back in those days, they didn't know half of what they know today. So to Mom and Dad, thank you. To all of you, thank you. I get the biggest piece.
That's right. What this needs right now is sugar.
I don't know if the biggest piece
This is the smartest.
Oh, where's your sense of adventure? Hire the handicap, they're fun to watch.